battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong.
The late 1960s were a key time. There was protest on the streets, demands for votes, jobs and houses, and change was in the air.
Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going on.
The civil rights movement was formed, and it was a turning point in history. 50 years on, opinion is divided on what exactly happened and who was involved.
Writing on the Eamonn McCann website, Declan Kearney argued it was the strategic decision of the IRA and Sinn Fein leaderships that helped to form the civil rights movement.
Republicans were involved. The IRA and the Sinn Fein leaderships encouraged their activists to organise and to campaign under the umbrella of the civil rights movement, alongside other Democrats, other political activists, human rights activists, communists and trade unionists. So the role of republicanism was central to the emergence of the civil rights movement, along with many others.
So are Sinn Féin trying to claim a place in history? Bernadette Devlin, as she was then, was a leading figure in the civil rights movement, later becoming the youngest woman to be elected to Westminster.
I really don't have the political space in my head, and I don't think anybody should, to engage in the delusional silliness of individual ramblings that people have about the past.
So do you really think Declan Kearney is delusional?
Yes, no doubt about that. With respect, I think the article that Declan Kearney wrote is delusional. You know, and when I say that, I say it has very little basis in reality.
We represent a movement that stands simply for basic human rights and basic human
Eamonn McCann was also in the civil rights campaign. Today he questions Sinn Féin's recollection of the time.
I think Sinn Fein are trying to colonise history. They're trying to claim every advance sort of in any bit of militancy over all the years of the Troubles as their own. And of course this isn't true. Sinn Fein is attempting to portray themselves, and more importantly to portray the IRA as a natural, inevitable outgrowth of the civil rights movement, which is certainly not true. There are other possibilities there. And they're also trying to pretend that they instigated the civil rights movement.
Others insist that Sinn Féin are using the history of the civil rights campaign to justify the subsequent actions of the IRA.
The civil rights movement was about equality. The Republican movement and Sinn Féin and the IRA were about Brits out and Irish unity by force. So, you know, it is a rewriting of history to pretend that the Republican movement fought a war to get equality. They did not. They fought a war to get the Brits out and to unite Ireland, neither of which they succeeded in doing.
So are Sinn Féin laying claim to something they have no right to by suggesting the party and the IRA were influential?
I haven't said that the leading members of the civil rights movement at that point in time were exclusively IRA or Sinn Féin activists. What I have said is that the reality is that Republican activists were involved directly with many, many others in the formation of the civil rights movement.
But the danger is people are saying you're trying to claim ownership of something that wasn't there at the time.
And that clearly isn't the case, because as I've already said, the civil rights movement, when you look at it through the lens of historical objectivity, had multiple parents and gave birth to many children.
This week, Sinn Féin continued to make remarks about the civil rights campaign. This time it was Alex Maskey who tweeted, "Unfortunately, it took more than the CRA, the Civil Rights Association, to secure rights in the putrid little statelet NI, Northern Ireland." It's a tweet that did not make an impression with Bernadette McAliskey.
Whatever it is Alex Maskey is trying to say, he would want to say that in a way that reflects any depth of political thought or understanding. rather than a developed culture of opening your mouth without any prior thought and allowing abuse to fall out of it.
Aside from the arguments over what happened 50 years ago, is there a broader lesson to be learnt? As politicians grapple with what needs to happen in the future, what can they learn from the past?
50 years on, the work of the civil rights movement remains unfinished.
I do think that what the civil rights movement taught me is that when people of integrity, with the right aims and with justice as their aim, come together to achieve something, the sky's the limit.
The lesson I take from the civil rights movement is that the major things which we achieved towards democracy in the North were achieved by people power on the streets.
I rarely look back unless I want to learn something from the past in order to do something better in the future. If we look at the work that has to be done in Northern Ireland, it ill befits anybody in this place to claim bragging rights for the past.
Stop, children, what's that
5 decades on, the history of the civil rights movement still divides opinion. Much has changed, but an agreed narrative remains elusive.